Hello, my name is Gretha and welcome to today's live Q&A on the topic of raising bilingual children. I am the author of the book Bringing Up a Bilingual Child, and I am a family language coach. I help families to set up a family language plan on how to raise their children to speak the family languages or how to introduce additional languages to their children. I'm driving force behind the website multilingualparenting.com, and I also run the Multilingual Parenting Facebook group and a Facebook page. Today I'm answering at least two questions. They are from Gretha and Violetta, and if there are any additional questions in the comments, I will pick up those too. So the first question is from Gretha, who is Dutch. Her husband is French and they live in the Netherlands. They have two children, about 4 and 5 years old, and Gretha says that they do not practice 100% one parent, one language. Gretha's French is near native because she's worked and lived in France, so she switches languages, also speaks French to her husband. Her husband speaks only French to the children, so they live in the Netherlands, but they mostly reply in Dutch. She says that their daughter does make an effort to reply in French, but lacks the ability to ask questions or form whole sentences. Although they do understand everything in French, i.e. they are perfectly receptive bilinguals, so they understand everything. And Gretha and her husband seem to be doing everything you'd expect them to do. They read French books to them, watch TV in French, and the children go to a French playgroup, which is fantastic. Of course, the school and daycare is Dutch. So Gretha's question is, should we ask the children to reply in French only? Well, I am not. I usually don't recommend that parents request that child that you have to answer in a specific language, because that might, if the child finds it difficult, that might create negative connotations with the language. So that's why I recommend to try to find ways of making it compelling for the child, so the child wants to answer in the language. Pretending not to understand, I know many parents successfully use this approach. I'm also not a big proponent of it, because you will be found out sooner or later. It only takes a phone call where you have to answer in the language that you've just pretended not to understand when your child spoke it, and you'll be found out. It's better to try to create the routines that children want to speak the target language with you. And Greta also asked, is it too late for them to be completely bilingual? No, definitely not. They are 4 and 5 years old. They can be perfectly bilingual. So there are maybe some changes you could introduce to support your children in starting to express themselves more in French, because it's the getting going which is usually the most difficult thing, and then it gets easier from there. So, and Greta asked, do we have to do OPOL, one parent, one language? No, you don't have to do it. OPOL is a great approach and in many families it's the only viable approach. But since you mentioned that your French is near native, you can absolutely switch to speaking French with your children if that feels okay to you. This would then create a different environment for your children. You would be a so-called minority language at home family, where the home environment would be fully French and the Dutch would only come from school, daycare, or the community. And this would definitely give your children's French a boost. So why not give it a try? They might object, your children, to start with, if you switch languages. I know I've done it with my youngest daughter, and she wouldn't let me switch until I kind of introduced a kitten who couldn't understand the language. So that's how I introduced the language. But you're in a different situation there. You already have the French language in your home, and you have already you already speak it with your husband. So try gradually introducing more French by speaking French to your children as well. They already know you can speak Dutch, so if you find that there are certain topics that you are more comfortable in speaking Dutch, then do so. It's fine. Dutch they won't get confused. They already have a clear separation between the languages in their heads, so you can switch, and if you switch more and more to French, that would be helpful for your children. Hi Laura, I'll pick up your question here. So your husband is from Germany and you're from Mexico, and you live in Mexico, but your husband hardly ever talks to your daughter in German. So you speak English and Spanish because you can't speak German. Watching programs with my daughter in German can help her. Yes, any language exposure can help, but for your daughter to become a fluent, or to learn German and learn to speak German, she will need to interact in German. So how old is your daughter, Laura? I know I have heard this from especially fathers before, that they find it difficult to speak with the child if they feel that the child doesn't understand. So I would discuss with your husband and ask him she's only one, right? So she's not. I presume she's not speaking very much yet. Would he be comfortable? Does he read? Would he be comfortable more in reading books to her? Because that would be a good start. That he would sit and read with her, then he would get used to using German with her more. But to your question, would it be good to watch programs with your daughter in German? Yes. Do you understand any German yourself? You didn't mention that. If you understand it, at least you can follow programs with your daughter. But I mean, the ideal thing is definitely that your husband would speak more to her. Maybe when she gets a bit older, he feels more comfortable doing that. But it is important that he starts now, because the longer you leave it, the more difficult it is to switch languages. So try to get him, if you do not have books in German that you can read, then do that. Buy some books and ask him to read those, and maybe he can watch some programs together with your daughter as well, because then he can discuss. That could be the discussion topic, and he can expand on what's happening in the program. So TV is a good help, but it does not replace human interaction, because that is the most important thing. And hi, Amaya. Your husband is Dutch, but he speaks Italian as his first language. And you're Spanish, and you both speak English and Spanish together. Your son is 5 months old and spends periods in Italy and Spain. should we keep the one person, one language rule, or can we mix them sometimes? Well, I think it's pretty much impossible to be 100% consistent with the one person, one language approach. So sometimes I think every parent will mix them a little bit, but with regards to consistency, what I say, the less exposure there is to a language, the more important the consistency is. So if a child gets about the same amount of exposure, enough exposure to two languages, then the consistency is not as important as if there's a very restricted amount of exposure to a certain language, then it gets more and more important to be consistent with the language use, because it's not the mixing, it's the amount, and it's also the routine. If you're not consistent in using language which there is very little exposure to, then it easily happens that it kind of slips away and you are not using it enough so the child can actually pick it up. And I will pick up, I can see that Violet or Violetta, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is online, so I will pick up your question. This is actually a follow-up question to a previous Q&A, which I just put the link in if anyone who wants to read it. It's about introducing German alongside Polish while living in the UK, and the husband also speaking Scots and English. And the question initially there was a question, Violetta, about introducing German, and you said that it didn't, although you are fluent in German, you didn't feel comfortable in speaking it with your daughter, and I can understand that, and then it is better to use other approaches, like do it through rhymes and play and games, so not just using it in everyday situations, but in specific in specific scenarios. Reading books is a great it's a great way to do it. Thank you, Violetta. So the follow-up question is about the family language plan, because Violetta, you have Polish, and then you want to pass on German as well. And then it's the question about Scots and English with your you live in an English-speaking environment where your husband speaks English and Scots, but one of your question is that you find that your husband is not speaking a proper English. I suppose he's using a dialect, a local variant, which is very common, and you ask whether you should be correcting him, and that you feel that you should maybe also try to introduce correct English so your daughter doesn't learn anything wrong from your husband. I would, of course, this is so much to do with the family dynamics, but I would not correct your husband in front of your daughter. I know she's only small, she's only 5, but I would try to avoid getting into a habit of correcting your husband in front of your children. By doing that, I feel, that's my feeling, that you undermine his language, and then he might not feel too comfortable about it. You also have, I don't know if you've already done it, I recommend it, that you speak with your husband and how important is Scots to him. Does he want her to learn Scots, which is absolutely fine. but if he wants that, then that's the language he should use with her. She will. I wouldn't worry too much about the English, Violetta. You have already Polish and German on your plate. Concentrate on those two. So pass on your Polish, because later on, when she grows up, you will also have to think about if you want her to learn to read and write. So it's a big commitment when you do two languages on your own. So I wouldn't go into the English bit. I can understand your concern, but it's fine. And it's okay for your daughter to pick up the way your husband and speaks. When she goes to school, she will learn the proper English, whatever that may be. I myself didn't know proper, so I grew up bilingual, Finnish and Swedish, but the Swedish I learned was a dialect. I spoke only a dialect when I went to school, where the language was the so-called proper Finland Swedish. So I learned that. I call that my third language. I learned Finnish and the Swedish dialect at home, and then the English at school. And keep in mind, in Finland, where I grew up, we started school at 7. So it's and I can speak proper Swedish. Learned it very quickly. So I wouldn't worry too much about the English, and I wouldn't correct your husband. I understand when you say that it's annoying when the plurals and the singulars are not right, but there are more important things for you to concentrate on, and to make sure you get right with making offering enough Polish exposure and German exposure. So concentrate on those two. Thank you. Let me just see. There was one question. So, question from Norma, sorry. Your daughter is 3 years old and started school in September. You live in France. Your husband is French. Majority language is French, and now minority languages are English and Spanish. My daughter is not speaking. Right, I got a problem with seeing the whole. A teacher told us to increase the use of French at home to help our daughter. Right. The fact that your language is English, and then you have Spanish, and your teacher asking you to start to speak French with your daughter, I don't agree with that recommendation, purely because of course the teacher is only looking at from the academic perspective of the teacher wanting your daughter to learn French as quickly as possible, while you have to look at it from the perspective of that she also needs to keep her English and her Spanish. And so if you start to introduce French into the home, it very easily happens that French gets more and more space in the home and pushes out the other minority languages. And as you say, if your daughter is of shy nature, then that's who she is, and she may not speak that much. Maybe work on that aspect instead of trying to make her more confident in speaking. I know I recommended my daughter, she was older than yours, but to take some go to drama classes, just to be able to kind of come out and not be so shy. So that's, I think it's more work on that part, because as a mother, you know your child best, and then I trust, and I think you are absolutely right when you're saying that it might be because of her shyness. Of course, I don't know your daughter, but switching to French at home, I do not believe that's a good thing. If there are some programs or something that she likes to watch in French, yes, why not? You could do that. Also, reading is good. So if she loves books, then sometimes in that way I think you could introduce some French, that you read some French books with her together, if you know French yourself. I presume you do when you live in France. So I wouldn't switch to French at home. You can support her with the language in other ways. I think I missed the question. For some reason I can't scroll. Laura, did you have a question? If you can copy and paste it again, then I'll see it, because somehow my screen isn't scrolling here. Otherwise, what I will do after the Q&A, I'll pick it up from the comments and I'll answer it from there. Alan, Aisha, good to hear from you. How are you? How are your children doing? So that's actually all that I had today. And Laura, I'll come back to your question afterwards in a comment, because it's my scroll bar has disappeared here, so I can't find it anymore. Sorry about that. Okay, there will be another Q&A in 2 weeks' time. If there are any questions, or you got any friends who want to ask questions, just send them in and I'll pick them up in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for today, and have a good rest of the day. And thank you, Norma. Yes, books are great in any language. Okay, thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.